Welcome back to the Cinema Truth Sleuths and Horror Hounds. I'm your host, True Horror Stories, and today we're going to go over another Patreon requested modern horror movie. This horror movie came about and was requested after I did a stream on the Danvers Asylum a few months back. This was one of the last projects that happened at the once Danvers Asylum prior to it being demolished and rebuilt as some sort of apartment complex, which I still don't fucking understand to this day. The synopsis that we're given on IMDb goes as follows. Tensions rise with an asbestos cleaning crew as they work in an abandoned mental hospital with a horrific past that seems to be coming back. Now, I've never seen this movie before, but I really like the fact that they're tying in the significance of the location into the storyline of this movie. That's really fucking cool to me, and I'm pretty sure that that's going to be really cool going into this. Now that we've got an idea of the synopsis, why don't we go ahead and take a look at the poster for this movie. See, I actually really like this poster because most good posters will tell you everything you need to know about the movie by just looking at it, and this one definitely does that. Now, there are only 3 images that make up this poster, one being the Danvers Hospital itself, the second being a restraint chair in a dark room, and the third being what looks like a ghostly figure. As all other horror movie posters have, there's a tagline on this that says, "Fear is a place," and I really enjoyed that they continued to go back to the Danvers Asylum as a point of focus for this movie. Now that we've got the synopsis and the poster review out of the way, we can go ahead and get to the Rotten Tomatoes comments, and boy are we gonna come in swinging. Kamal H gives a half-star rating and says, "Only watch if ready to yourself afterwards." Please tell me this is a troll. I really hope this is a troll. Unfortunately, it doesn't get any better with Tassos L, who gives another half-star rating and says, "What the fuck is that? I repeat, what the fuck is that? I'm angry with myself because I chose every crap that's ever been released to watch. For those who need pills to take a nap, I would say that this film is a perfect sleeping away." Fuck me, I'm gonna hate this movie too, aren't I? God damn it. Our last Rotten Tomatoes comment is from Ted W with a 1-star rating who says the following. "What the flip did I just watch? This movie made no sense. The plot sucked. The characters are very dumb and literally have no brain. They didn't do their research and they trusted the wrong person. My god, I legit regret watching this kinda. Yes, we all need a balance of good and bad movies, but literally what the flip is this movie? There's 9 tapes aka sessions with a multiple personalities disorder kinda like the movie Split, but this was just confusing. Whoever wrote this movie was either high as a kite or high with the munchies. It makes no sense at all. Maybe they were trying to go the metaphor way, but it doesn't work. The acting is horrendous, and it is as bland as an expired saltine. I don't recommend this at all. If someone did enjoy this, I would like to have a conversation with them. Anyway, this movie sucked, end of story, and the twist was not paid off, but at least it wasn't predictable." Why can't I get a good movie to review, guys? Why? With a heavy heart and a low level of enthusiasm, I'm gonna go ahead and review this movie for y'all. Pray for me while I get into another episode of Cinema Carnage. Let's fucking go. This movie starts out a little bit different than most others that I've watched to this point. They usually have some sort of scene before they hit the title card, but not in this case. We basically just see the same chair that's in the poster for the movie, with the room spinning and then the title card popping up. Okay, I'll take it. We get to the next scene and meet two of our main male characters who are talking back and forth about, I'm assuming one of them's daughter having an ear infection. And I just start busting up laughing because one of the guys is the main dude from CSI Miami.
How's Wendy holding up?
After the initial laughter of the dude from CSI Miami subsided, I realized that those two characters, the one from CSI Miami and this movie, are so fucking different because he's an absolute dumbass. Once we get over this little tiny scene of chit-chatting, we pull out of the vehicle to see that it's a hazmat company that they work for, and a security guard is there with them at the front gate to what seems like an asylum, ready to escort them in. Now, what makes this character really fucking dumb to me is that he can't seem to understand why a security guard would be at a shut-down hospital, even when it's explained to him that transients and children go into the building to vandalize it. How do you not understand that? That's basic logic for any private property. Their escort shows up and they're starting to drive up to the grounds, and we get this beautiful, picturesque view of Danvers Hospital, and it's breathtaking that it's that beautiful still after all this time and everything that's gone on within. We get one last really good look of the Danvers Hospital from the front of the building before we jump inside and see the two guys being led by their escort through the building. We get a little bit of backstory about the building itself. All of it I've already covered before, but it was still kind of interesting watching this grounds guy start talking about how it's like a bat's wings with how all of the different places within were set up.
One for female patients, the other for male, you know?
Guy keeps yakking and yakking about how it's a national landmark and they can't tear it down, even though he'd rather have a Walmart or something put up. And while he's talking, one of the guys finally stops and says, "Hey, what the fuck is up with this room?" And we see what looks like the hydrotherapy stuff from there, where they put the patients in really fucking cold water and generally torture them. Finally, the two guys just say, "Dude, take us where the problem areas are so we know what we need to do and where we need to work." And the guy just looks completely disheveled, like he'd just been stomped all over and disrespected. But regardless, he agrees to do it and takes them to where the problem areas of the asbestos are. They get taken through this big kitchen, talk about random crap again, before they end up in this massive room, and you could tell that the place is just loaded with disgusting asbestos, and it's definitely gonna get anybody sick if it's not completely taken care of. And when the two guys point this out to their escort, the guy goes, "Oh, well, nobody else that did the bids to this said anything about that," before going to take them to another problem area in the building. They get taken to an area that leads all the way down through the building and are told that where they're going was where the extreme ward was, meaning all the really psychotic patients were kept there. And this is also where that chair that we see in the poster and the very beginning with the title card is located. While the first guy, who's got the child with the ear infection, apparently named Gordon, is staring down the hallway at this thing, we start hearing these flickering radio noises and somebody saying, "Hello, Gordy," before he's snapped out of it by their escort and his partner. They go through another series of dark tunnels, talking about random crap, as always, and once they get to a very open area, the escort asks Gordon and Phil is CSI Miami guy, how long it would take for them to do all the work. Phil initially says 3 weeks, but Gordon jumps in front of him and says, "No, we can do it in 2. The look on Phil's face is basically, "Fuck you, dude, for just talking right over me. This is gonna be a bunch of bullshit."
2 weeks.
He's the captain, right?
You better believe it.
Well, I guess you guys see.
Hey, fuck you, man!
They go through some other rooms with some weird pictures before they're done with the whole tour, and Phil has to go back inside because he forgot a bag. So he tells him that and just goes back inside.
Here, it's like, gentlemen, I'm
What,
sorry.
Phil?
I left the bag. I gotta go back.
Oh, you know where you're going?
Yeah, middle of the Batwing, right?
Yeah.
While Phil's off going to get his bag from inside, we learn a little bit more about how exactly Gordon and his company got this contract, and it seems that their escort was some sort of in on the backside because they don't normally do things the way they're doing it now. Gordon says he can get the job done with a few really good guys in a week instead of the 2 that he gave initially and the 3 weeks that Phil said was really safe. This just shows how desperate he is as he begs and begs that he absolutely needs this job. We get a couple of quick weird scenes where we see Phil get his bag, we see that Gordon's outside of his house where his family is and he lives, and he's looking at a bunch of pictures all weird and shit. I don't know what the deal is. I'm assuming that we're gonna get some sort of answers to this later on. And then we are introduced to Hank while they start working on getting all the asbestos out of the asylum. But we already know Hank is an asshole because apparently he is sleeping with Phil's ex-girl and starts making comments about how she says hi, and the reason why she dumped Phil is because he couldn't get it up. That's some fuckery right there. We get to meet the other 2 people that are working on the job, Mike, who's been working with Gordon for 5 years, and Gordon's nephew Jeff, who's an absolute idiot right off the bat. Guy shows up, plugs in a big stereo, starts cranking some really hardcore rock, and Hank comes in the room. Hank says, "What the fuck are you doing? You're gonna use a really loud radio in an area that's full of asbestos. The sonic waves from that radio are gonna shake all that shit out of the vents, and you're gonna inhale it. Do you want to die?" And tells him to change it, which prompts Jeff to turn the volume down like the good boy that he is. We go outside to see the group having a lunch break, and it finally comes out that Gordon had them slotted for this to get done in a week's time, when it should normally take at least 2, just so that they can get a $10,000 bonus. Now, Hank brings up a good point, which gets shut down by Phil, that there isn't any clarity on whether or not that $10,000 is to be spread amongst the group, or if it's everybody individually gets those $10,000. And that starts a little fight between Hank and Phil that's actually kind of fucking funny and makes Phil look like a fucking boss, in my opinion.
You don't like it, Henry? I'll give you a ride to the airport right now.
Let it go, Phil. You drive me to the airport. What about Amy? You gonna take Amy to the airport?
She likes to travel.
Phil and Hank are stopped by Gordon when a security guard shows up to give them the keys to the property so they can get in and out a lot easier while they work over the next week. And they start talking about why exactly the asylum was shut down to begin with. The guard says that it's due to budget cuts, but Mike pops in and says no, it's because of budget cuts and the Patricia Willard case. This is a fictional case in which a teenage girl is put in the asylum for typical teenage hormonal behavior and ends up becoming a guinea pig for a new kind of therapy that brings back repressed memories. And with this therapy, she started to recall some very disturbing things, like her parents taking her and an infant out into the forest 3 times a week to have satanic orgy rituals. Yeah, that. This ends up being false later because a medical exam on Patricia shows that she is a virgin. There is no signs or indications that she'd ever had sex before. And though she initially was going to sue her family for this, she would end up dropping the suit and her family would countersue, which started the chain reaction of asylums shutting down. The whole time Mike is explaining this, Gordon is staring at his phone with his home number pulled up as if he's debating whether or not to call them, but he snaps out of it when he starts to realize that Jeff is getting traumatized by the details of the case and stops Mike. We find out that Mike knows all of this specifically because his father was the DA for this case. We find out in another scene that Phil is trying to get Hank fired and get another guy from a different company on because he absolutely hates Hank. However, Gordon tells him to fuck off and let's get this job done. We see the guys are working again, and we get to a point where we're seeing Jeff and Mike working on another room where the power just goes out randomly. Mike asks Jeff to go downstairs and check the breaker. Jeff says he's got nyctophobia or fear of the dark, completely understandable, and Mike decides to go down himself. While he's looking and setting the breaker up to make sure that the power comes on, a completely separate room he wasn't anywhere near the first time has its lights turn on. He gets curious and goes to see what's in that area. In that area is a records room with a bunch of old crap in it. His lights kind of go out a little bit while he's looking around, and then they flicker back on to show a box that says evidence on it. He opens the box while some weird, edgy, little scary noises happen in the background, and there's a bunch of tapes in there. Not very scary at all so far, not impressed, but at least we're gonna start getting into the meat and potatoes of the actual plot of the movie now. We then see that everybody but Mike leaves, with Mike giving the excuse that he wants to work on the generator. And instead of working on the generator, we see him back in that room where he found the tapes, starting to listen to them. The first tape we listen to is for a Mary Hobbs, and what is heard is really fucking chilling. It starts out as listening to Mary crying and sounding distressed as she's asked about prior memories from 20 plus years ago. And it gets really fucking creepy because she goes from sounding like this.
Thing happened.
Mary, something did happen. That's why we have these sessions to help you remember, so you can get better, okay?
No, I can't remember.
File note. Patient is showing extreme agitation. She is putting her fingers in her mouth. Mary? Mary?
Have you seen our doll, Mr. Doctor?
Who am I speaking with?
Mary got a China doll from her mommy, and we can't find it now.
To sounding like this.
Have you seen our doll, Mr. Doctor?
I will give them this. The look on Mike's face is the exact same look I had when I listened to this the first couple of times. From what I can gather, this Mary has severe split personality issues, or dissociative identity disorder if I'm reading the DID part on the label of the video correctly. And what we're hearing is what sounds like some sort of murder occurred on Christmas Eve 22 years ago. We get all these different names of her different personalities, one being the princess, another being Billy, and then the Simon character coming into play, but we don't get the whole story at first. While we're listening to this tape, we're seeing all the other guys that are working on this particular project, and all of them have some sort of fucked up life. It's just sad. Our next major scene is Hank going around spraying parts of the underground that need to get cleaned up. And while he's doing that, he looks down and sees this big silver coin from 1884 on the floor. And then he sees another one, and it just makes me think of that one Family Guy skit with James Wood. Ooh, piece of candy.
Ooh, piece of candy. Ooh, piece of candy. Ooh, piece of candy.
He follows this short trail of silver coins to a spot in the hall where there are some loose bricks and a few more coins sticking out. So he decides to stick his knife in there and start prying the bricks out, and when he does that, a waterfall of coins and rings come out of the wall. While he's admiring the treasure he's found, he gets a call from upstairs saying that he's needed with some of the other guys. And you can see the look on his face of, what the fuck, I can't let these guys find this. So he starts shoving the coins and stuff back into the wall so we can hide it and come get it for later. What he doesn't know is on the other side of the wall is the morgue and the crematorium, which is really fucking creepy, not gonna lie. We get another quick scene of Gordon trying to figure out exactly where Mike is while everybody else is taking a lunch break, and we find that he's once again lied to stay behind and listen to these tapes. This is apparently the 5th of 9 tapes that have been found, and in this particular one, the doctor is talking to the personality Billy. Billy is being asked where all the other personalities live. He says that he lives in the eyes because he sees everything, and the princess lives in the tongue because she likes to talk. This immediately stops when Simon is brought up again, and I'm starting to get curious about who this Simon person is, or personality for that matter. Mike joins the rest of the group on lunch, and apparently Jeff found a book that has the different records of people booked at that particular asylum, and of course, Phil has to take a jab at Hank.
This is great. 17 were committed due to disappointed expectations. Henry, they're talking about.
Hank's response to Phil getting on him is prompted by Jeff when he asks, what would you need to do now to get committed to an asylum? And Hank says murder, right, Mike? Mike responds clinically like a law student, and Jeff gets on his case. When Jeff gets on his case, Mike grabs Jeff and starts talking about how you could murder somebody or severely harm them by stabbing something in their eye and moving it around in a certain manner. We get some very key pieces of information in the next scene as Mike leaves Hank and Jeff alone to talk while he goes to get something. Now, while he's gone, Hank starts talking to Jeff about whether or not he's got an exit plan, because the particular job they're doing could possibly get you killed by the time you're 30. When Jeff is confused by the conversation they're having, Hank blurts out that Gordon would have lost his company had they not gotten this job. When this bomb is dropped, we get an oh so ominous little image of Mike finding some white roses covered in red paint. Ooh, spooky. I'm so scared. What's gonna happen? Why can't I review a good horror movie for once, guys? We get another piece of vital information about Gordon from Hank when he says that the guy is normally very calm, but he's starting to show some cracks, like he might lose his control and is cool. I don't know about you, but I'd be pretty pissed off if a job was the make or break for my business. We also get the add-on that kind of clarifies some of the weird things we've been seeing with Gordon at what's supposed to be his house when he stops to take a break and try to call his wife. They apparently get into a fight and she hangs up on him. So basically, his child is sick, his job is stressful, he's about to lose his business if he doesn't make this contract, and his marriage is falling apart. I would probably be losing my shit too. This only gets worse because once his wife is hung up on him, he's looking out the window and sees Phil talking to these random guys and exchanging money. What's going on? What the fuck? Is he betraying him? We don't get any answers to this, obviously, because the next scene has Hank showing back up on the property in the middle of the night to come collect the treasure he's found. Now, he's not just found silver coins and rings, he's found fucking dentures, pulled teeth, a whole cavalcade of weird shit that's silver and gold. He also finds a bag of fake eyes, and the tone when he finds them immediately shifts. It goes from just hearing him bang into his music to a weird radio static-y noise that we heard from earlier in the movie. It gets even worse because he reaches in for a third time and pulls out a lobotomy needle with hair around it. Gross? He grabs his treasure and starts to leave before we start to hear some weird noises like somebody else is in the building, which shouldn't be the case because it's the middle of the night and it's all locked up normally, right? Well, they epically fail on landing a jump scare as this happens. Homeboy freaks out, starts running, and ends up stopping when he thinks that he's just seen some birds. Here we go again with people using birds and animals as a fucking jump scare. Come on now, that's really dumb and really lazy. He thinks he's alright and starts to leave again, a little less freaked out, and is unfortunately intercepted by something that immediately cuts the scene off. Next day, we find out that Hank has not shown up. This is the answer we get when Phil calls Hank's girlfriend his ex-girlfriend.
Well, our favorite piece of shit, Hank, went to Amy's last night, packed his car, told her that he found his meal ticket, and then bolted to Miami to casino school.
Gordon seems to be the only one worried that this isn't actually what's happened to Hank. And when Phil asks why and tries to convince him that it's a good thing that Hank's disappeared, he gets confronted about what Gordon's seen the other day and asks, who are those guys you were talking to? Phil won't tell him shit, and Gordon ends up getting in a tussle with him before leaving the area. While Gordon's gone and it's just Jeff, Phil, and Mike, Phil starts losing his fucking cool and going off about everybody and everything, saying that Mike shouldn't be a fucking lawyer, Gordon shouldn't be a fucking father, it's all his wife's idea and it's fucking up his job and his business, and pisses Mike off enough to where Mike says fuck you and leaves. Gordon goes off on his own and ends up sitting in the graveyard outside of the asylum while Mike goes back to the records room and finds the records for Mary Hobbs. This is a little ominous because on the front of the folder Mike finds says deceased number 444. Gordon apparently is sitting outside right next to the broken gravestone number 444 while he's on the phone with Wendy, who apparently hangs up on him. Gordon puts the phone down as Jeff walks up to him, and how in the hell does Jeff not notice this dude is on the brink of crying? Never get to find out exactly why he needs to be forgiven like he'd asked on the phone with Wendy, but what the fuck, kid? How do you not notice this? We go back to Mike as he's listening to these session tapes, and we're seeing these images of reports of her dissociative identity disorder and her split personalities from the perspective of other people, while we're listening to her crying, pleading with this doctor to stop asking her these questions because she's really traumatized. All she remembers is falling off of her bike and getting a scar on her chest, but apparently that's not what happened. She doesn't last very long under the questioning, and another personality, Billy, comes out to say, yeah, I know what actually happened, but she doesn't. The scene ends when the doctor is pleading with Billy to bring out Simon so that they can actually find out what occurred to Mary. We find out exactly why Gordon is losing his shit every time somebody brings up his family, or we see him trying to call his wife and not getting an answer. He hit her. Apparently his story is that he showed up after getting the job at the Danvers Asylum, ready to celebrate and be all happy as shit. His wife is cooking pasta and he surprises her, which causes her to turn around and accidentally spill boiling water on him. That was enough for him to be so mad that he slapped her. And from then on out, he's been staying at a motel. What a dirtbag. Phil also tells Gordon that the two guys that he was talking to earlier were basically vandals that he was telling, get off the property, don't come back, or I'm calling security. I really fucking doubt that, Phil, okay? I don't trust you. The next scene we get is so fucking goofy, I swear to God, I just lost some brain cells. Gordon is asleep on site in his truck, and he starts having a nightmare. And the nightmare has that radio voice talking to him again. What's goofy is how it ends, and it ends like this.
Do it, Gordon.
We also get confirmation of the boiling water because we see these massive fucking boils on his leg that he hasn't gotten treated. Holy shit, laddie! Get that shit treated! Fuck! And I was right to have an issue with Phil, because in the very next scene he pulls Mike aside and tells him exactly what had happened between Gordon and his wife, even when Gordon had asked him not to say anything to anybody. God damn it, Phil, you're an asshole. This is the big spoiler warning for the rest of the movie. If you want to go watch the movie, go do that and then come back to watch the ending of this. If you don't care to watch it, alright, go ahead and continue. Let's keep going. Now, while Gordon's interrupting Mike and Phil having a conversation about getting him off the job, Jeff had been sent downstairs to check the breaker since for some reason the power went out. He goes down there and does that, but when he comes back up, he sees Hank standing there staring out a window on the staircase. When talking to Hank, he's getting these weird answers and something is very wrong. Jeff goes running, though, when he sees Hank put a finger on one of the windows and there's blood. Jeff runs into the room where things are about to go down between Phil and Gordon and tells them that he's found Hank, and this is the response he gets.
If he's in Miami, Jeff, why would he be here? How could that be possible, Jeff?
Like I said earlier, shit really hits the fan at this point, and Gordon believes Jeff. He doesn't believe a damn thing that Phil says and decides to go look to where Hank is at. They follow him upstairs and Hank's not there, but there is still the blood on the window and there's a coin on the floor. Now, this really jogs something in Gordon because just a second ago, Phil had given him one of these similar coins that he apparently found. Just literally a scene beforehand. Phil is spouting off at the mouth, and he says, you all heard me talk to Amy when she said he's in Miami. Gordon turns around and goes, no, only you heard that. We didn't hear her say that. You told us that's what she said. Before we can get any answers into what the fuck is going on, we hear some footsteps upstairs, and these four split off like the goddamn Scooby Gang. Mike going off with Gordon, and Jeff going off with Phil. Jeff and Phil go downstairs and end up hearing some staticky noise like we've heard multiple times throughout the movie, while Mike decides to say fuck that and ditch Gordon so we can go downstairs and listen to the very last session of Mary Hobbs's tapes. Phil ditches Jeff and goes down further into the tunnels, still hearing this music and radio tone. While Mike's listening to the last tape, the power goes out and he gets up to go take care of that. Jeff is left in the dark, however, and that freaks him the fuck out. Mike gets the power back on, and that allows Jeff to escape the building while we're listening to the last bit of a tape, where Simon pops out and says, "I'm the one that killed Mary's entire family." We then find out I was right, and Gordon had not been totally truthful about what had happened with him and his family that night. Apparently, he not only hurt his wife, he murdered her, their infant child, and their dog. Oh, that's heavy. And apparently he did it because Simon took over his body while he sleeps. That's insane, but it just gets even more insane after that. Phil is down in the catacombs and finds a half-naked Hank just sitting there rocking back and forth with a fucking lobotomy pick in his eye. Hank tells Phil that Gordon was the one that shoved that thing in his eye after he'd found the treasure. Apparently it happened during sleepwalking. Gordon shows up in the middle of the night while Hank is fucking around, finds him, corners him, and shoves the lobotomy pick in his eye. Phil pulls out a knife from his pocket and goes upstairs to confront Gordon, who is apparently now in Mary's old room. There are pictures of Gordon's family plastered all over the room, and there's red paint everywhere symbolizing how he murdered everybody there. Gordon takes Phil's knife and murders him with it before going upstairs to murder Mike. After Mike is dead, he goes outside to kill Jeff and then sits in his car the rest of the day. Gordon goes down to the tunnels at some point because when he goes back inside the next day, Hank is wrapped up in a clear sheet with a lobotomy needle still in his eye, and he's still alive. The guy that Phil called from another company shows up, goes inside, and finds Gordon standing over Hank. When Gordon's about to be confronted about what's going on, he grabs the guy in a headlock, sits down, pulls the lobotomy needle out of Hank's eye, and murders the new guy with it. We get the summarizing of everything that's going on, and the movie ends with Gordon sitting in the room once again with a broken cell phone, pretending to call Mary, begging her to forgive him. Due to losing so many brain cells because I had to try and summarize that last 30 minutes of the movie in some sort of coherent way so anything makes fucking sense, I'm just gonna get straight to the point. No, I did not like this movie. No, I would not suggest it to anybody. In all honesty, I quite literally can't think of any redeeming qualities to this movie. It's extremely slow. It's not scary. It tries so many different kinds of jump scares, scare tactics that just do not hit. There's so many twists and red herrings that I couldn't pay attention to the storyline, and it didn't pay off in the end when the actual truth of the situation comes through. So, in short, miss this shit. Have a good night, guys, and I'll see you in the next Cinema Carnage.